Okay, so I originally wanted to make this video way back in 2014. It was going to be called What Will Computers Be Like in 2020? But as you may have noticed, it's already 2020. Yeah, that's right. I procrastinated on making this video for 6 years. Over half a decade. I originally came up with this idea when I started getting into computer hardware. At the time, I was making Blender animations on some seriously underpowered hardware. I was mainly using the Pentium 4 and Pentium D machines at my school, as well as a Core 2 Duo laptop that I had. At one point, I drew up some specs for an upgrade PC, and just for fun, I'll read them to you. Fortunately, these weren't the final specs. AMD 6 Series A6 3500 APU. 2 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM. Yeah, just 2, not even 4, which was the standard at the time. Motherboard. ASRock A55M HVS FM1 socket. SSD. Dell 128GB internal SSD. Case. RAID Max Atlas ATX 295WU Blue. Now I'm glad I didn't end up getting this case because this thing looks really dated. PSU. Corsair CX500. Now this power supply is actually the one I ended up getting and still use to this day. When it came to power supplies, I didn't want to cheap out because I've heard some horror stories of people buying horrible power supplies that just exploded and stuff, and I didn't want any exploding power supplies. Alright, enough of the backstory, it's video time. I'm gonna take you back to the past to show you some articles from 2014 that discussed what computers might be like in 2020, and we'll see how they hold up to reality. Okay guys, I'm back. I had to take care of something real quickly, but let's look at this old forum post about how computers will be in 2020. The original poster asks, what do you think will be the specs for an average PC in the year 2020? Let's see what people said. Core 2 Duo and Windows 7. Seriously, there has been a massive plateau, especially if you don't factor in gamers/enthusiasts. I would bet your average PC across all segments of the US is still a single-core Windows XP box. And that's what, 10-year-old tech? And the better question is, what will standard tablet specs be? Or will a platform between tablets and notebooks emerge? This is kind of an interesting one, I think. Core 2 Duo, Windows 7. Yeah, Windows 7 is just finally starting to go away because they ended support for it. But yeah, their Core 2 Duo and single-core Windows XP box, that's a little bit underestimating, I'd say. There's very few dual-core processors that are sold, especially in any sort of average PC nowadays. And single-core processors are, I think they don't even make them anymore. I might be wrong. Maybe there's some sort of mobile processors that run single-core, but I don't know of any desktop ones that do. And generally, a lot of applications require at least 2 cores to run. This next one, 16-core CPU with integrated graphics, active cooling, 1 terabyte of memory, 1000 terabyte SSD. Now, 16-core CPUs are quite common in the high-end marketplace. Like, I'm running a 6-core CPU, and I would say that's a fairly standard mid-range PC in the current year. And integrated graphics, spot on. But 1 terabyte of memory and 100 terabytes SSD, yeah, that's kind of a bit on the optimistic side right there. Average memory, maybe 16 gigabytes, and SSD like 2 terabytes maybe. Actually, I don't know what SSD capacities are like. Maybe it's more like 1 terabyte, I don't know. 4 8 cores running at 6 to 8 gigahertz, 128 to 256 gigabytes of RAM, 10 terabyte hard drive. Besides for the gigahertz number, this seems to be about the average server processor. Oh, and they say higher-end computers will have 32 to 64 cores, which that's true, but a lot higher end. That's probably overestimating the RAM and storage and underestimating the CPU. We might see 64 consumer level CPUs by then. Yep, 64 core consumer level CPUs do exist, but they're not average, they're high end. But yeah, they definitely were overestimating the memory, which you will come to find is a very common topic on this thread. 16 to 32 cores running at 6 to 7 gigahertz, 1 to 2 terabytes SSD, 32 gigabytes of RAM. It'll be running Windows 15. Little did they know they stopped incrementing the Windows number quite a while ago. But yeah, 16 to 32 cores, although the speeds are quite high. I believe the highest clock speed you can find in a consumer part, at least not overclocked, is 5 gigahertz. And as you know, most things run at about 3.5 to 4 gigahertz. 1 to 2 terabyte SSD, exactly correct. 32 gigabytes of RAM. Yeah, that's pretty standard for a more medium high end of a computer. Of course, an expired photo bucket thing. 5 nanometer core process on doped silicon. We're currently on 7 nanometer, and I believe the actual feature size is much larger, but we're on equivalent to 17 nanometer in terms of the performance that we get. True parallel processing with hundreds of wirelessly networked cores. Wireless cores. Oh my gosh. If only this guy knew how big of a problem latency is in memory, like how that's like one of the biggest bottlenecks in processing. Wireless cores will probably never be a thing. In servers, there is RAM over internet that is possible, but that is generally for applications that aren't very latency sensitive. But wireless cores, there is no practical use for them because in any environment where latency isn't a problem, you'll have so many cores that the wireless bandwidth will be entirely eaten up. You're going to see silicon alternatives becoming economically and technically viable to get past the apparent 5 nanometer wall. Not quite there yet, but maybe in the later 2020s that will be a thing. I'm gonna say 4.5 gigahertz quad will be average. Clock speeds have essentially stopped increasing and most people don't need more anyways. Ding 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 ding! Obama 2009 got it correct. 4.5 gigahertz, very standard frequency. Quad core, very standard. He didn't make many predictions on other things, but yeah, this guy got it. 8 real cores. Most 8-core processors are actually 4-core with hyper-threading or whatever AMD calls their version. Yeah, that was a thing back at this time. Yes, 8 real cores is very common, but 6 cores is still the standard right now. Or 4 cores on the medium-low side of the tier list. And on laptops, yeah, 4 cores is still standard. And at 4 gigahertz, yeah, that's about right. Perhaps even 16 cores. Yes, there are 16 cores on higher-end machines. 128 gigabytes of RAM, but possibly higher. Yep, here's another overestimating of the RAM. No, 128 gigabytes of RAM is not very common. 16 gigabytes is by far the most common number, and generally about 3, 2, 3, 4 on phones. And about 8 is common on laptops. 6 terabyte spindle drives will be available, but chances are we'll be looking at 1 terabyte SSDs. Yep, he got it. A 4 gigahertz 8-core processor that will use about 10 watts of power at max speed. Nah, not with that low power. Maybe more like 100 watts. Lithium-ion batteries that still aren't much better than today. Sorta true. Seriously, it's been over a decade since we've had any real breakthroughs in battery technology that actually made it out of the lab and into production. 32 gigabytes of memory, very close. 3 terabyte hard drive or 1 terabyte SSD, dead on. A lot of people predicted this pretty accurately, but very few people predicted the amount of memory that would be used. Integrated graphics is about twice as powerful as 2 GeForce 680s and SLI. Yeah, it still won't be good enough to play the latest version of Crysis. A lot of Crysis jokes in this, really shows the age. No, the integrated graphics hasn't gotten that powerful yet, but I don't doubt that it will, that it won't be a time when it will become that powerful someday. Desktops won't exist. Yep, everyone will be on their iPad 10 running iOS X. Here's an actual screenshot from iOS X from the future. I think this picture just gets funnier as it ages. Like, I get that this is like meme, I guess, that is still going to look exactly the same. But as time goes on and this just looks more and more outdated, it just gets funnier. Although I don't know exactly how much iOS has changed since I'm part of the KaiOS gang. What's with people thinking about these high gigahertz numbers? Top of the line processors 9 years ago, 3.4 gigahertz. Top of the line processors today, 3.5 gigahertz. And now the speed has been going up, there hasn't been a whole lot of economic incentive for it to really go up that high, and there is also a power usage barrier. That's a bit of oversimplification. Yeah, the processor speeds have been going up over time. Alright, looks like we got a good look at some of the stupid and not so stupid predictions of how computers will be in our current year. Now, there is no way this video will get promoted by YouTube with such a non-clickable title. So if you know anyone who might find this video interesting, share it with them. If you don't know any neckbeards who are interested in this type of video, just give it a like. If you're new to this channel, I highly recommend you check out some of my older videos. I have all kinds of things, so if this isn't what you're interested in, you might be interested in one of the other things. I'm gonna put a playlist on the end screen that will be automatically tailored to which videos you might like.